Does it make you proud, Kat, to come from the country that birthed reality television?
So proud.
Like, I didn't even know until Dominic told me that the Netherlands was the birthplace of so many of these reality TV shows that became so huge in the 90s. Big Brother is the most iconic example of a Dutch reality TV show, of course. Did you grow up watching that, or had it already gone kind of out of fashion by the time you were a teenager?
No, not at all. It was around, but I just didn't watch it.
Too cool for that.
I was watching other very bad television.
A more recent TV format that originally came from the Netherlands that has since become insanely successful is The Traitors, De Verraders. Have you watched it?
I haven't. I have heard about it, though.
Yeah, my family-in-law are obsessed with the UK version. If you haven't heard of it, it is a reality show based on this kids game where a few of you are quote-unquote traitors whose job is to destroy the majority. I feel like this game has maybe become an allegory for the politics of our time. Anyway, it is basically a game where you have to lie and backstab. And apparently it works super well on television, because if you don't already have a version of this TV show in a country near you, you probably will do soon. Versions of the show have recently been announced for Spain, for Italy, for Romania, and for South Africa. And new ones seem to be popping up all the time. But yeah, I find this phenomenon of TV formats that cross borders to be completely fascinating. Like, how does the business work? What are the pitfalls of trying to translate a TV format from one culture to another? I have many questions, and I found the perfect person to ask them to. Jean Chalaby is a professor of international communication at City University London. He literally wrote the book about the TV formats trade. I gave him a ring to find out more. Jean, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much.
So, what exactly is the history of this phenomenon? When did people watching TV in one country first start being presented with shows in formats that had originated in another country?
Oh, I think I've got an exact date for you. It's 1951. Mm-hmm. And the first broadcaster to purchase the format was the BBC for a CBS show called What's My Line? And what was new is that CBS, or the CBS right holders, didn't sell a script. They sold what they called a package, an idea. Most formats in 1950s, 1960s, 1970s were US game shows. So in the 1980s, the Wheel of Fortune, The Price is Right became really the first, I would say, near global formats that were broadcast in many, many countries, not globally, but in a lot of countries. So a few European formats, Les Jeux Sans Frontières. It was a very famous show when I was a kid in Switzerland.
Games Without Borders. What was the idea behind that show?
I think it was different towns and different villages, maybe, were competing each other in a series of physical games. So you had a few British formats, you had a few French formats, Italian formats, but most of them were American, 1970s, 1980s. And then in the late 90s came really the revolution, which was reality television. You had Survivor, which was basically bumps on the beach. You had Big Brother, which is still on in certain territories and has a lot of successors. So Love Island, which is quite big now, you can trace the origins of Love Island to Big Brother, basically. And then you have Idols. So Idols was started in the UK and became huge in the US, attracting tens of millions of viewers. Before the 90s, very few TV executives knew what a format was. And after the 90s, everybody knew what a format was.
And what was it about these shows that were appearing in the 90s that made this such a phenomenon?
In a game show, what is a game show? It's a journey. Okay, it's a journey of a hero. It's someone like you and me who has the courage to take a test. What makes it compelling in this person, this hero, is someone like you and me. Is they always ask the question is, what will you do with the money? People identify with this. And the good answer is not, I will give it to charity. Nobody believes this. The good answer is, I want a new car. I want a kitchen extension. You identify with these people. So because you identify with these people need to come from your own culture and need to speak your own language. And that's the key to the format trade, but because the person has to be local.
You say that, but I'm slightly ashamed to admit this, but lately I have dabbled in watching this Netflix show called Love is Blind. And after I started watching this show, I started getting loads of different national versions of this show being suggested on my Netflix front page, like Love is Blind Germany, Love is Blind Brazil. So I'm wondering, has the rise of streaming platforms like Netflix, has that changed the sense that the hero has to be local?
Yeah, I think Netflix will be more known for dramas as they do a little bit of reality television. I think I have to say streamers have not been very kind to the format trade because they have a transnational audience. And the way they operate is that they like to make local content travel. They commission a drama in France, like in Marseille or what have you. It's French, but it's French for export. The format trade is mostly for broadcasters because broadcasters have a national audience. I would say most formats, it's kind of daytime television. Streamers have them some formats, but mostly streamers lack the content to travel.
And for those broadcasters, the trade in formats has clearly become a very big business. Can you give me an idea of how big a business this is?
A good format would travel towards 20, 30, 40 territories, but I do not have a figure now because the trade, you're going to pay a percentage of production cost. I mean, Koh-Lanta may cost €500,000 to produce every episode. The format fees would be 8% or 15% of this. But it's a big trade. All the big production companies like BBC Studios, ITV Studios, Banijay, which is based in France, would have a few thousand formats in the catalogs.
Wow.
Quantifying it in euros or dollars is difficult. In the mid-2010s, it was €3 billion. But I don't know how it was calculated. I suspect they took all the production costs, whereas in fact, a more accurate description would you have to talk the format fee. So if you want to produce the traitors, for instance, in France, you'd go to whoever owns the traitors. I think it's Old Stream Media. And they would give you the production Bible with all the secrets, how you produce this show.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about this. So let's say I come up with a genius idea for a TV format. How would I go about making loads of money by selling it to different countries?
Mostly, you need, if you're in France, you need to sell it to a French broadcaster. So the selling point, they look, I sold this format to France Télévisions. And France Television, with my format, used to have 15% of audience at 3 p.m. And with my format, they had 19% of the audience. And if you can show they have increased the performance in terms of audience percentage, you have a winner.
And are there any examples of TV companies basically stealing ideas for formats that exist already in other countries and saying, we didn't steal this idea, we didn't borrow it, we came up with this ourselves, it was our own idea?
Yeah, it does happen a lot. So there is an association called FRAPA, and you can go to FRAPA. I can't remember what it stands for. It's the trade association in the format world. And yeah, copyright infringement can be quite frequent. Mm-hmm. And most of these things are settled out of court because the courts, I think they got more serious cases to look at. I'm not saying it's not taken seriously, but it's not top of the pile.
Are there any countries that are particularly great at coming up with formats? I feel like a lot of the most successful formats have come from the Netherlands, they've come from the UK. These are not massive countries. Is there any reason why they're particularly good at this?
Yeah, no, I mean, you mentioned two of the biggest producers. I could add maybe Korea. The UK was number one format producer. Okay, the reason for this is very simple, is that the UK was the first country in Europe to disaggregate the television value chain, meaning by this you have broadcasters who broadcast and a huge production sector whose job is to come up with format ideas.
I see. So they were like private companies battling to compete for having really good ideas.
Exactly. So Channel 4, I would say, was a typical example. By law, could not produce anything. So everything you had on Channel 4 would be outsourced to these independent producers. often would specialize in a genre, whether scripted and unscripted drama or game shows or reality. That's why these countries are very good. And Netherlands will be the same.
Interesting. So once a TV format has been acquired in a new country, how does a TV company go about adapting the format for a local market and the local culture?
So they pay a fee, they pay a production fee, and they would have access to what we call the production Bible. A document that is very confidential, it's hundreds of pages, and they give you all the do's and the don'ts of the format. And it's kind of subtle. It gives you a lot of secrets. They tell you how to make it work. Reverse engineering is more difficult than it looks. So if you can see a format like Britain's Got Talent, for instance, because I want to do the same in my country, it'd be very difficult because behind the format, there is a lot of knowledge and expertise, what you do at certain stage of the production, how you prepare for it, how you get the contestants, so on and so forth. So every format will have some secrets that are not shared, and you need them to make this show a success.
Are there any examples of shows that have actually ended up being quite different or feeling quite different in one country compared to the original because the local company thought that the domestic audience would prefer it a certain way?
The answer depends on the genre. So with game shows, no, because it's very much controlled. If you watch Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, anywhere in the world, you're going to recognize this as Millionaire. You have to buy the graphic, the music, and the Bible is very, very specific. What changed a lot, sometimes you have to rewrite the stories for drama. One example is Swedish The Bridge, the story of a body found at the border between, I think, Sweden and Denmark. And then they did a version in the UK, and it was the tunnel. It was under sous la Manche.
So the Channel Tunnel between France and the UK.
So yeah, some in drama, you may have to completely rescript the entire thing. But what you take is you take the internal dynamic. I mean, a very successful show in the UK was Fawlty Towers. As they tried to do it in the US, it was a complete failure because what is at the core of Fawlty Towers is a dysfunctional marriage. So if you take this idea out of Fawlty Towers, you don't have Fawlty Towers. The core idea has to stay the same. And for The Bridge, I'd guess it's the collaboration between two police forces with different cultures. So you can do it anywhere. You can do it between the US and Mexico if you want. But the core principle would be two police forces who have different ways of operating, have to collaborate to solve this murder mystery.
Are there any examples of formats that have been really successful in the original country and then once they are exported, it's just bombed? Or maybe examples of the opposite, a format that hasn't been that successful at home and then it's been exported and it's done really well?
Yes, so Survivor is one. In the UK, that was 25 years ago, and gone absolutely nowhere. So now we have something different in the UK. It's called I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. But Survivor has never been successful in the UK. Been successful in a lot of countries, about 50 countries. And in France, it's Koh-Lanta is part of French television culture. I mean,
It's huge.
It's huge. Now it's a French format because it's owned by Banny J.
Why do you think it didn't work in the UK?
Yeah, it's a mystery. I mean, you need to be close to the national psyche. Maybe in the UK, they want something less competitive. Sometimes you got technical explanations, but I don't believe in them about scheduling. I think it was the wrong time, the wrong day, or maybe the competition was very strong on that particular day. I think that, the question is deeper. And then formats that haven't worked very well, I think The Apprentice. I think the first version was the US, I think, with Donald Trump, if I'm not mistaken. And they tried, and of course, you need someone with certain characteristics to make it work. I know it hasn't been successful everywhere, and particularly in Germany. Yeah, you need a certain person to do this with a certain charisma. So, but yeah, of course, formats die all the time and they can be revived.
Something I love about watching a format that is familiar from your own country in a new country is like noticing the slight differences between them. There's a French friend of mine who watched for the first time the original version of the Great British Bake Off. She's obviously much more familiar with the French version, which is called Meilleur Pâtissier, and it's quite similar. It does have this kind of cozy feel, but it's also a bit more serious as a competition. And she was like quite horrified by the quality of the cakes on the British version. She was just like, oh my God, your cakes are so untidy. It's just very rude.
Something that's coming up in me that I'm wondering now if it's a fake memory. I have these memories of sitting in Barcelona in the dentist and seeing Catalan Pingu. And in my memory, I'm like surprised that Pingu speaks Catalan because Pingu in England didn't say anything. I have no idea if this is true. So rather than fact checking it, could some Catalans write in and tell me if Pingu is speaking in Catalan?
I just love the idea of Pingu like having Duolingo and learning Catalan in the Antarctic.
I know. I'm also just, if this is true rather than a fake memory, like imagine the Catalan script writers just making up an entire script that was not originally written.
And he's really like sassy and sarcastic.
Exactly.
Love this idea. Thank you so much to Jean for enlightening me about the whole world of TV formats. I would love to hear about your experiences of TV formats that have arrived in your country and have either worked super well or have mystified people and been a total flop. Write in and tell me. hello@europeanspodcast.com.